Hey guys, how's it going? We've got something pretty special today because we're back with another lens review, and we're going to be looking at a lens that I've been really interested in getting my hands on for quite a while because it is such an interesting lens. Like most of these reviews so far have just kind of open them up, let you know a little bit of stats, but this guy actually has some pretty interesting elements about it and some pretty interesting little details that I'm going to go over really quickly before we jump into it. And this is him, the 11 to 24 Canon L series f4, amazing lens. We'll get into an unboxing in a second, but first I'm going to talk you through a couple of those groovy little elements and groovy little things that are going on within this lens. So obviously we're looking at an 11 to 24mm focal length, a maximum aperture of f4. This guy's minimum focusing distance is 28 centimeters. You've got 9 rounded diaphragm blades, so that's pretty classic for Canon's L series lenses. It means you're going to get a really soft, nice background fall off and blur, which is really nice. It's autofocused. There's no filter thread because it's quite a domed lens. Quite a domed lens. It's one of the largest aspherical lenses, actually, coming in at 87 millimeters, which is super cool for a wide-angle lens, you know, for them to be able to accommodate such a huge piece of glass at the front of that lens. And the weight of this guy is 1.18 kilos. So quite cumbersome, quite large for a lens of this type, but definitely worth the wait. It's an awesome lens, a really cool lens. So yeah, I figure I'd talk you through a couple of the interesting little things about this guy. So the 11 to 24 is actually Canon's widest rectilinear lens. Now, a rectilinear lens, basically that just means that the way that the light bends within the camera, it minimizes the distortion. It gives it a flatter image, so you don't get that warping and barreling around the edges, or at least a reduced amount of barreling. The closest lens to this type that is rectilinear that Canon has made is the 14mm 2.8 prime, which is also a gorgeous lens, but we can talk about that guy at a later date. So at 11 mils on a full frame camera, you're going to be getting 126 degrees of view, which is massive. It's a massive amount of view. So for anybody who's interested in shooting landscapes, this guy is incredible for it. You can get so much into this lens, which makes it a gorgeous lens, but a difficult lens to shoot on in terms of composition, because you've got so many elements that you've got to balance. Seeing as the lens is so large on the front and it is such a wide lens, you're going to be dealing with quite a bit of flare. Or, well, the lens has a reduced amount of flare due to the coatings that they've got on it, but because it is such a large piece of glass, it's very easy to get the sun or a harsh light source in there and create flares or, you know, little bits of overexposure inside of your images. But Canon knew that this would be a problem, and they've added some awesome coatings onto this guy. So there's 3 interesting coatings on this lens. There's a sub-wavelength coating, there's an air sphere coating, and a fluoride coating. Now, your fluoride coating is pretty standard. It's basically just like a dirt-proof layer that's going to be on the front and back of your lens. Now, this just stops things like dust and other particles from landing on there and sticking on there, and reduces the amount that you're going to have to clean your lens, which is great. The air sphere coating is the really interesting one. Now, this guy is basically a cushion of air that sits between a couple of the planes of glass inside the lens. Now, what it's designed to do is it's designed to act as like a crash mat for the particles of light to smash into. So rather than bouncing around through the lens, they kind of work to absorb that light a little bit better, which is great because, like I said before, it flares quite easily, and you don't want that when you're taking a beautiful landscape. You want it to be nice and high contrast and with lots of detail, which is great. So yeah, basically these 3 coatings are working together to reduce the amount of ghosting within the lens, the amount of flaring, and to increase contrast, which they do an excellent job of. This guy is also weather sealed, so when you're going out in your early mornings, you're doing your shoots, you can be assured that there's not going to be anything slipping into the lens and causing fungus and mold and things to grow. In saying that, when you zoom, the very front of the lens barrels slightly, it telescopes slightly, sorry. So it goes back into itself rather than protruding out. But basically what that means is that there is a point at the front of the lens where things can slip into it. So as long as you're not facing your camera upwards and zooming and playing around like that, you should be relatively fine in terms of making sure that no particles and things are going to go inside the lens, which is great. So yeah, there's no filter thread on this guy, as I said before, because of that massive aspherical domed front. But if you're a landscape photographer, there's plenty of filter trays and things that you can place on this lens, so that you can still use your polarizers and your NDs and all of that to get beautiful landscape photos. So there's always ways to work around the fact of not having a filter thread. It just means you've got to be a little bit more careful in not nicking the front of the lens, which for a lens that costs you $4,000, you really don't want to be mucking around and doing things like that. So yeah, that's basically it for a little bit of information about the lens itself. I reckon let's jump in, unbox this guy, and see what we're actually looking at. All right. So there we have it. The 11 to 24 mil f4. Stunner of a lens, absolutely gorgeous. Autofocus and manual focus here on the side. We don't have any sort of image stabilization or anything like that, but with a lens this size, adding an extra image stabilizer would just make it even more chunky and even more cumbersome. It's got a built-in lens hood like most ultra wides, because to be quite honest, shooting without one is a bit silly. You're going to get lots of flare off of a lens that is this domed, and taking a lens hood off would just be, I don't know, crazy in my eyes, but each to their own. You've got a really cool looking lens cap here that's got the two grips on the side, so you know that once you've got it on there, it'll stay on there and it won't come off. So you can be more than comfortable putting this guy in your kit bag and knowing that it's going to be taken care of. You've got your focus wheel here, which has, I'd say about 100 degrees of throw in your focus, and then of course your zoom wheel at the back, which is amazingly smooth, which is one thing I love about these L series lenses is, yes, they are built incredibly well, and the glass within them is amazing, but they feel like their price tag. They do call them the L series or the luxury series for a reason. Yeah, absolutely gorgeous lens, really beautiful. The body of this guy is a plastic. It's like a plasticky build, so partially to reduce weight, I think. Because it is such a heavy lens, weighing in at 1.18 kilos, and quite a top heavy lens. As you can see on the top, we've got this massive lens element, and then we kind of are a bit more conical coming down towards the base of the lens. But I was going for a bit of a shoot this morning, and we'll go and have a look at those images in a second. But I was shooting with it this morning, and with my 6D on the back of it, it really didn't feel as top heavy as the lens on its own. So still quite a well balanced lens and gorgeous to shoot with. I did find though that it being so large on the front meant that mounting it to my camera was a little bit difficult. I needed to make sure I definitely had a firm grip on it before trying to mount it. But apart from that, really gorgeous lens, super easy to use. With the USM motor in there, you know it's going to be a fast, accurate focusing system as well. So yeah, really beautiful piece of glass. Excellent work, Canon. It's an amazing lens. So yeah, I reckon let's jump on the computer now. We'll take a look at the images that I took this morning, and we'll go through the look and the feel of the images that you can get from this guy. Okay guys, so what I've done is I've dragged an image straight into Photoshop. We were down at Adelaide Street today, just playing around, goofing around with the lens, and I saw this intersection just down the street from my work, and I thought, wow, that's a pretty interesting spot. So yeah, nothing particularly fancy with this photo, but I did want to point out that this is actually at 11 mils. This is an 11 mil image, and if you take a look at the edges, if you take a look at the just exactly how straight and precise those are, even though there is a little bit of perspective warp, a little bit of push there. In terms of having straight edges, this guy is incredible. Like, absolutely stunning. Very minimal distortion. So in terms of making a super wide angle rectilinear lens, you guys have absolutely killed it. Gorgeous lens, gorgeous images. You don't have any sort of issues with distortion, really. I mean, shooting at 11 mils, you're going to have a lot of perspective warp, but in terms of distortion and barreling and things like that, you're actually pretty safe. In terms of sharpness, you can see here, I mean, this particular person was moving along relatively quickly, so I'd say that's a little bit of a motion blur there. But in terms of sharpness, it's gorgeously sharp. You get lots of detail from the lens, which is great. You know, if you're shooting your landscapes and things, you want to make sure that all the images that you take are going to be super sharp, and that you get as much detail out of them as possible. So well done there. Another thing to mention is vignetting. Now this lens, actually, there is a little bit of vignetting, and from a $4,000 lens you'd expect, you know, maybe a bit less than that, but from somebody who's shot with a 12 to 24 mil Sigma under these conditions, I'd say that this vignetting it's very minimal. It's nothing to worry about. It's something you can easily jump into Photoshop and correct. Obviously, going into any sort of post-production, you do lose a little bit of image quality, but nothing worth noting, really. Simply clicking your lens correction or once you boot up Photoshop or Lightroom will get rid of that for you. Another thing I would like to mention is up the top here, near these trees, you can see there is a fair bit of chromatic aberration. Now, partially this is shadow and partially it is movement, but I would say that this magenta underneath here is definitely a result of chromatic aberration. And a lens that is this wide, you have to kind of expect a bit of it, really. Again, you can see it in the edges of these windows. You can see it in the edge of the windows here, which isn't great, but I mean, with a little bit of work, you can easily get rid of that. It is a color that's quite easily isolated and corrected in post, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. What I'd be looking at is the sharpness of the lens and the lack of distortion from such a wide lens. So in that respect, really well done. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit less vignetting and a little bit more chromatic aberration control, but apart from that, I'm pretty stoked with the images that I got today, and yeah, it was really exciting getting out to shoot and working with that unusual composition. All you've got to really make sure is that you're keeping within your rules, making sure your rule of thirds is correct, you've got your leading lines in there. But yeah, it's a difficult lens to shoot with, but a fun one. Like I was saying before, once you nail those shots, once you get a shot that is really, you know, decently composed, then, you know, you can get some pretty interesting images out of it. And that's one thing that I really love about these wide angle lenses, is the ability to produce really interesting and dynamic images straight out of the camera. Alright guys, and there you have it. The Canon 11 to 24mm f4 L series lens. Incredible lens. I was so lucky to get my hands on it today, and hopefully I helped you guys out. If anybody's looking at the lens, if you have any other questions, leave a comment or send us a message. I'll try and help you out as best I can. And yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for tuning back in, and I'll see you again later. Alright guys, I hope that was helpful for you. If you want to check out some other reviews, there's a 16 to 35 review on the left if you click the link. And yeah, I guess that's about it. Comment, subscribe, like, and as always, keep on chilling.